In this video, I'll be discussing a very important concept called school complexes or school clusters, as which is discussed in the NEP, and this also becomes a part of the whole rationalization exercise and the whole consolidation exercise. So let's get started with that. So the idea which you are looking at right now, the picture which is there in front of you, so just keep in mind this picture as we discuss the various concepts of rationalization and consolidation, and eventually we'll come back to this picture and then you'll have a better understanding of it. So as we speak, this is the school education scenario in India. We have basically NEP. As per NEP, the Department of School Education and Literacy aims to achieve a gross enrollment ratio of 100 in education at all levels, like from preschool to secondary. So right now, if we talk about Meghalaya figures, we have that in elementary. Enrollment is good. The gross enrollment is there. Net enrollment is 100. But secondary, the enrollment is way less. There are various reasons for that. But by 2030, as per NEP, we must achieve 100% gross enrollment ratio across all levels. Now, the second point to note here is just look at how immense this whole education sector is, which is consisting of over 14 lakh schools, like almost 15 lakh schools are there in the country. 25 crore students are there in the school system, and then almost 95 lakh teachers are there in the whole education system. So how gigantic this system is, and it literally covers almost everyone. So among the schools in India, so now what is the breakup of different kind of schools? So this is also very interesting analysis, that 68.7% are government schools of all schools, 22.6% is private, and 5.5 are aided, and then there are other categories of school. So this is the overall school scenario before we do a deep dive to give you the overall picture. In continuation of the previous slide, now look at this fact. 89% of the students undergo admission process at least 3 times in their school life. So that means that there are different grades of school, different levels of school, different types of school. So if I am a student, I have to take admission multiple times. So if I go to a LP school, so once I clear that level, then there are no more classes, no more higher levels. So I have to go to some other school, UP school, then I have to go to secondary, then I have to go to higher secondary. So this also, even in Meghalaya, if you see the categorization, some may have to change the school 4 times, 5 times. So that is what is happening because of different large types of school which are existing. Now this frequent change, what happens is this creates a hardship for the student and for the parents also, and eventually it may lead to dropout, especially at secondary level. So data also shows retention rate of higher secondary schools having class 1 to 12th are almost 100%. So that means that, and as compared to, is very low in other type of schools, 44. So retention is how many students are being retained after one level to another level, up from elementary to secondary. So if there is a school, and this is very commonsensical, that if there is a school which offers from pre-primary to class 12th, then there are high chances that most of the students will continue till class 12th. And look at the other scenario which is there. So if I have to go to a LP school, then separately I have to find some UP school which is far away, and then subsequently secondary school which is even further. So there are high chances that I'll end up as a dropout. So this is the picture, shows it all, that there are different categories and there are very less composite K-12 schools. So this leads to 89% of them changing at least 3 times. That's a major statistics which should make us think. So now this is the overall scenario of the country, and you can see different types of schools, how many are there. So if you see only primary schools, which primary schools essentially it is lower primary where it is offering from class 1 to 5. So we have roughly around 7 lakh schools which are only primary. Then there are 3 lakh plus schools which are LP plus UP. And then there are some 90,000 schools which are only UP. Then you can see, you can pause the slide and look for yourself. I just want to tell you that out of the whole, so many schools which we talked about in India, the total is only 71,000 are only schools offering class 1 to class 12. So that's a very small figure. as compared to the total number of schools. So that is the whole idea of showing this slide to you. Look at the different type of varieties, and NEP basically, the idea of a school cluster or a school complex is basically to bring all this together so that we reduce the categories, and in future we should take attempts essentially to make more of these composite schools, K12 schools, which are offering from grade 1 to grade 12 overall together. Now this is the scenario in Meghalaya, what we just talked about overall India. Now this is the Meghalaya figures. So here you can see that predominantly we have lower primary schools. Out of our roughly 14,000, 15,000 schools, 9,000 of them, 9,185 to be precise, are lower primary schools. Then the combination of LP, UP is only 200. Then UP standalone schools are 3,000. And then the other categories, you can pause and have a look at them. But the point here to be raised is that only 59 schools are there which offer from class 1 to class 12. So this is like something needs to be looked into, and the other categories as well. So if you can see, there are like 10 categories. That's the whole idea of rationalization, to bring it down so that we can reduce dropout. There are various other benefits which we'll see subsequently. In continuation of the previous slide, these are the percentage distribution. So if you look at the primary school, which is class lower primary, essentially, they are 63% of the schools. So that's a big number, and only 0.4% of our schools are the schools which offer class 1 to class 12. So that's a fascinating fact, and in future the policies and everything, the decision have to be taken in this context, that we increase this capacity of these composite schools in Meghalaya. Now look at this slide, which tells you about the need of consolidation and rationalization. As we discussed, it's very commonsensical that if there are standalone things, if there are like 4 different categories of schools, like primary school is somewhere else, LPUP school is somewhere else, secondary is somewhere else, higher secondary is somewhere else. So what's happening is separate infrastructure. So there is no resource sharing, there is no teacher sharing, there is no optimal utilization of all the civic amenities, etc., etc. So these are the reasons. So if we do consolidation, then what will happen is better resource allocation can be there, infrastructure can be shared. For example, if there are like 4 subcategories, so 4 these different schools are there, LP, UP, secondary, higher secondary. Now we need to have a library in all. So there will be 4 libraries, but if it's a composite school, there can be one big library, and then students can benefit from that. Generally, secondary schools are having ICT infrastructure, LP schools are not having infrastructure. So if there is a composite school, they can share. So these are all the benefits. It reduces need for multiple admission. As we saw, almost 90% of the students in India have to change their school thrice in their school career. So if this happens, if consolidation happens, rationalization happens, then this reduces the need for multiple admissions, reduces dropout. Definitely, if there is a school which has all the classes, so there's less chances of students dropping out. This is a proven fact. Streamlining school categories, which is very important, is still very confusing with so many different categories and so many different type of grades. And better learning outcomes. Obviously, when you have all these things happening, resource sharing happening, interaction between teachers are happening, PLCs are happening, good infrastructure is there, obviously it will lead to better learning outcomes. Now let's get to the core idea of school complex and clusters as discussed in the NEP 2020. So it starts with describing that why we have so many LP schools, because under RT it was mandated that there are certain distance norms, that every 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, there have to be some LP school, UP school. So as a result of that, there are good number of elementary schools which has increased in great extent, and universal coverage has happened. So that's that. So but the problem with those is that these small sizes have economically they are suboptimal, and operationally it's very complex to run these schools in terms of putting more resource, giving more infrastructure, deployment of teachers, provision of critical physical resources, etc., etc. So then what happens is, for example, if there is in a UP school, LP school, there are 2 teachers. Now there are 5 grades, and plus there are in some places there are pre-primary as well. So they have to teach multiple grades. So that is a problem. Including subjects in which they have no prior background, that is also there. Then we don't have teachers for arts, music, sports, etc., etc. Physical resources are not there, labs are not there. As I said before, ICT is not there in these elementary. Library we are trying to ensure, but somewhere space is not there. Library room is not there. So these are the issues which have come up because of these high number of LP schools which are there. Now NEP says school complex. Now what is school complex? So what you can do is the secondary school can be clubbed together as a group with all the elementary. So if there are elementary schools in a radius of 5 to 10 kilometers, if there is a LP school, UP school, and then there is one single secondary school, so these all can be considered as a part of school complex, or you can say school cluster. And then for this school complex there can be a SCMC. Now every school has a SMC, school management committee. So this school complex can have a school complex management committee to oversee the resource sharing and collaboration. The DEO, in other states we have district education officer, here we have district school education officer. So DEO, BEO, other states we also have block education officer. Here we have BMCs to coordinate. So DEO and BEO can basically coordinate with the SCMC, which is the school complex management committee, and then the school development plan can be made and a school complex development plan can be structured. Basically it's the SDPs of all the school coming together. Now there is another idea discussed in NEP, which is twinning or pairing of schools. So what can happen is one public school and private school, if they are nearby, they can be paired, they can be like twins, and they can collaborate. The best practices, everyone can learn from each other. So this is also a great idea. It need not be just exactly about private public, it can be any two school which are there, that also they can twin and they can learn from each other. Peer learning, like we talk about between students, so between schools also this kind of peer learning can be there. Twinning and pairing of schools can be facilitated. The NEP part on the school complex also talks about few other things, that there should be in the future Bal Bhavans and established where students can just come and these can be placed in the school complexes. Basically Meghalaya has something similar, which are the CM youth centers which are there and which are doing the same thing, which are providing platform where students can come experiment their devices, their ICT, their computers, their internet, and they can just whatever they want to experiment, they can do those experiments. So these are the idea of Bal Bhavans. Then the NEP also talks about Samajik Chetana Kendra, which means that the school infrastructure which is there, it can also be used by community on a productive level, that they can have their meetings, they can have their group discussions, especially on education and other matters of development in the village. So these can be used as Samajik Chetana Kendra. So what will happen is they will come to the school, they will see the infrastructure, they'll become a part of the whole process to improve the school infrastructure, because that school is also acting as a Samajik Chetana Kendra. So that's a great idea again given in the NEP. So now coming back to the picture you saw in the first slide. So now I think it is more clear to you. So there are small units, like there is a LP school, there's a UP school, there's a secondary school, but we want to convert everything into a school complex or a cluster. Or the other idea is whatever new schools will be coming up, they should be promoted as a composite school having all the grades, and the existing schools basically can be upgraded to composite schools having all the grades. So that is the idea. Let's quickly look how a typical LP school looks. It will generally have 4 to 5 rooms. It's a small building. This is how a UP school, and now these are like standalone ones, they are separate from each other, they are distant from each other. So this is a typical UP room, generally will have 3 rooms plus 1 staff room. And this is the example of what we are talking about, a composite school. So what is composite school? Will have all the grades, that will have right from lower primary to upper primary, secondary, higher secondary, and also pre-primary also they'll have. So this is the idea of a composite school. Obviously physically it cannot be done everywhere, so that is why the idea of school complex is coming, where existing secondary school will be kind of teamed up with the nearby 5 to 10 kilometer radius LP and UP school, and they will act as a feeder, and then the whole thing will serve as a school complex, and they can share their resources among them. So this is the idea of school complex as described in NEP. we are to take some steps towards this direction. There are a couple of things. One is that in the future when we are planning, so one thing can be upgrading the existing schools. For example, there are some schools which are LPUP, so they already have from class 1 to class 8. So what can be done is to upgrade them, give them secondary section. So there are some secondary section which are lacking the LP. So if the location of the school is good and it is suitable to be expanded, if the land availability is there, if the resource availabilities are there, so then physically upgrading them into a school, composite school, that will be, of course, that is the first way of doing it. The second way is using this NEP idea of school clusters, basically bringing everyone together. In fact, they also talk about bringing Anganwadis also together. Everyone should be in the same campus, so that resources can be shared, so that teachers can collaborate, so that the other civic amenities can also be shared. So these basically the idea of school complexes. Let me know what you think about the school complexes and how we can implement this in Meghalaya, and how Meghalaya schools can benefit from this idea. Thank you.